Okay, so I just hit the 1000 rating mark on Dueling Book with Phantom Knights, so I thought it'd be a nice opportunity to talk a bit about the deck. It's a deck with solid rogue matchups all across the board. It is also a good meta call. It can play a lot of non-engine cards, hand traps, and all that good stuff. But before we talk about the deck in detail, I want to give a huge shout out to Dinkaboo. He's basically the guy that came up with this deck list, more or less. He made second place at the DCS, which is a reasonably respected tournament right now. So yeah, huge shout out to him if you didn't know about him already, right? For this video, I'll show you the deck list that I'm using right now. It's pretty much his list, but I changed a few cards. I'll explain the game plan, and at the end, I will show you a little combo. Basically, the reason I really enjoy Dinka's approach to the deck is because in the past, Phantom Knights used to be this 45-card combo deck that just vomited out Dragoon with 2 Fog Blades. Didn't have any good follow-up and played a lot of bricks that other combo decks didn't have to play. So that's why the deck always felt just worse than other decks in the format. But with this new approach, it takes the format into consideration. That's very common for Dinka, right? We always see crazy deck ideas from him that consider the format quite a lot. And I like it. The format is slower than it used to be. It is more fair than it used to be. You don't have to put up the craziest board in order to win your games. And this deck doesn't put the most aggressive board anymore because it doesn't play Dragoon. At least not in the main deck for him. Not at all for me in the side deck still. We'll get to that later. But doesn't play Dragoon anymore. It reduces the amount of bricks in your deck and you exchange power for that, but usually you don't need the Dragoon on your end board. You just end with Evil Swarm Nightmare or Redoer and 2 Fog Blades, and that's mostly enough for the format. It wins Tri-Brigade, it wins Dragon Link, it doesn't always win Prank Hits. Let's talk about the deck list. We play 3 Torn Scales, a Rhoda, 2 Silent Boots, 2 Ancient Cloak, and 1 Ragged Gloves. Torn Scales is, in addition to Tour Guide and Terror Top, the best starter of this deck. In addition to playing, or drawing rather, other Phantom Knight monsters, this card can play through hand traps very efficiently. Rhoda searches you every Phantom Knight monster, as well as the Kagemusha Knight, that's why we play one of it. And 2 Silent Boots and 2 Ancient Cloak are very important because turn 3, when you have to kill your opponent, you need to have other Phantom Knight targets in your deck to send off your Rusty, to search with Ancient Cloak, and so on and so forth. So you need multiple of these. It seems like a weird ratio at first, but once you get used to the deck and how it plays, you will realize you definitely need 2 of each of these. And Ragged Gloves we play because sometimes, this is also various reasons, but sometimes you want to send a trap of Bardiche from the deck, but you have to send a monster. But Ragged Gloves, you can send Ragged Gloves, and Ragged Gloves can then send a trap from the deck. So either Phantom Knight's Wings or Phantom Knight's Fogblade. Sometimes you also don't really want to banish a Phantom Knight's monster in the grave, but you want to trigger Scales. So then you just banish the gloves and put any of the other 2 here in the grave. So that can be reasonably nice. This deck plays 3 Tour Guide because it's the best starter of the deck that obviously always gets hand trapped, but it's not a reason not to play it. This card is amazing. Play the Burning Abyss monsters that you obviously play in conjunction with the Tour Guide. Now, Dinka does play the Seer, but in my testing, I felt like it wasn't really needed because the additional body the Seer gives you doesn't really accomplish anything in my build, at least, where I don't play Apollosa as well, where he plays Apollosa. In my testing, it didn't really come up that I even made that card, and it doesn't effectively play around Nibiru anyway, because you need to open 2 extenders, I believe, which is pretty unlikely, so I'd rather use the extra deck space for other cards. But Skarm is one of the cards that is still very good because it gives you additional follow-up. You always summon Skarm off the graph, obviously, as I said, and then you go into Bardiche, and in the end phase you will get value back from that instead of all of it dying to Nibiru, which of course Nibiru is a card that this deck is very prone to, but right now not a lot of people are playing it, so that's one of the reasons why we can even consider this deck in the first place. Kagemusha Knight, the rest of the monsters here in the main deck are just extenders, level 3 extenders that let you play through hand traps. One of them being Kagemusha Knight that is searchable off the Rhoda, that's why we'll play one of it. This chain blocks your Tour Guide, which is very nice. The 2 Danger monsters are the best level 3 extenders in the game, probably. Terror Top is the best starter in the deck by far, because it doesn't take your normal summon. It's even worth playing a Brick, more or less, Hackathonborg. But this you can even summon if you control Levier, so that's reasonably alright, I guess. Even if, in the end, like if you go Levier first turn, usually it's pretty awkward, right? But still, I think game 2, if I would side the Dragoon, this could be nice in conjunction with the Levier. The Psychic monsters here are nice because you can play it with Emergency Teleport. They obviously both summon themselves if you control a level 3 monster, so they're just very nice extenders. And then we just play 3 Fogblade and a Phantom Knight's Wing. So the Phantom Knight's Wing seems weird at first, and it seems like you don't really need it. But then you think about, well, actually, you go through 2 Fogblades at least on your first turn. And then for the following turns, you need cards that special summon monsters out of the grave. So the Phantom Knight's Wing is actually pretty important. At first, it seems you don't really need this card, but once you start testing, I feel like you need this card for sure. Turn 3, this becomes incredibly important. And then one of the reasons, like I said, the deck is so good is because it can play a lot of non-engine cards. So we managed to pack an incredible 13 amount of non-engine cards into this deck, which Dinka, and this is pretty much all copied from him here, he chose to play 3 Droplet, 3 Ash Blossom, 3 Impermanence, 3 Pot of Prosperity, Called by the Grave, and Imperial Order. So let's talk about these. Droplet is one of the best cards in this deck, especially if you have the synergy with the Phantom Knight monsters and the traps that you want to have in your grave anyway, and many cards in your hand that you won't care as much about as in, let's say, a Tri-Brigade deck or something of that nature. Makes this card incredibly good. 3 Ash because it's just the best hand trap, and 3 Impermanence because it doesn't play into talents and it's reasonably good versus the meta, and you can even draw it as a 6th card and it will be alright versus an Apollos or anything. Pot of Prosperity is one of the reasons this deck is also very good, because this card gets you to Tone Scales, and even Droplet go in second pretty consistently, so I like it. Also, it gives you access to Order going first pretty often, so that's also nice. Order and Called by the Grave, you play these because these are just going first win buttons for no reason. Imperial Order is also an optimistic mine, which this deck wouldn't inherently play. So on Dueling Book, at least, this won me like 3 matches. So yeah, these are like, I wouldn't cut these at all. They are pretty nice. For the extra deck, we play 1 Levia, 2 Phantom Knight Breaksword. You definitely need 2 of these. 1 Evil Swarm Nightmare, 1 Redoer, the Downerd Magician, and Zeus. So I think this is more or less the standard Exceed package. For this deck, I think Dinka played another rank 4 that sort of can attach itself to Zeus, which is also pretty nice. But I chose to use my extra deck space a little bit differently for Anaconda and Dragoon, but I'll get to that later. Pretty much your first turn is going to be you make Breaksword, you pop your own Breaksword with Bardiche, and then you summon out 2 Phantom Knight monsters and make a rank 4 monster. So depending on your matchup, it can be Redoer or Evil Swarm Nightmare. Redoer is actually insane versus, let's say, Sky Striker or any trap deck, because against Sky Striker, which is obviously a deck that won't kill you on their first turn usually, this basically lets you draw 2 cards because you'll get spell cards most of the time, and then you just accelerate on that. So that can be pretty nice. Of course, against trap decks, this just becomes absurd. And Evil Swarm Nightmare is good against most decks. Don't forget that this card isn't once per turn, so that's reasonably nice. Zeus is a card that comes up in this deck actually because you played as sort of a mid-range deck that sometimes just want to poke the opponent because it can't go for game that easily, and then you just make a Zeus and win the game that way. I do play IP because there were moments where I thought about Contact C being a very strong card versus this deck as well if you don't play this card. And this gives you an additional interruption also versus Lancia, for example, which is a reasonably often played card in this format. Cherubini, I did think about playing 2, but still I wanted to fit the Dragoon package in the extra deck, so I decided to play only 1. Sometimes turn 3 if your opponent hand trapped you in your turn 1, and then it becomes sort of a weird slow game state. You would like to have a second one, but I just couldn't fit it, and it didn't make the biggest difference so far. 1 Unicorn for the IP as well, and sort of to link live into Access Code Talker. 1 Bardiche, this is of course mandatory. Broken card. Access Code Talker, also a broken card. One of the best extra deck cards actually here, or you can barely say best, but one of the best utility cards right now in the game in general, I think, is Underworld Goddess. This card is underappreciated. So against Tri-Brigade, basically, your opponent often will end on a double Dragon Lords with Apollosa and Revolt. And this deck can easily just vomit out 3 monsters. And then you basically just link off that double Dragon Lords with your 3 monsters going to Underworld Goddess. Underworld Goddess is unaffected by Apollosa because it doesn't target, and it can negate the Revolt in the grave. And then the Dragoon package. So the reason I like the Dragoon package is I feel like some matchups for this deck can be very difficult. I feel like Shadol is a very difficult matchup. Sky Striker can be a difficult matchup without this card, and this just wins a lot of games going second. And there are matchups where, you know, I don't really need my Impermanence going second versus Drytron, for example, and I don't really know, like, of course I'm gonna side Cycle Reader, right? But maybe I don't want to, I don't want to side Pot of Prosperity because it's just going to get negated by the Herald anyway. So that's when I like to side the Red Ice Fusion, because it just gives you so much power going second as well. It just seals game for no reason at all. And there definitely have been games where I didn't play Dragoon, and then if I would have had Dragoon in this certain scenario, I would have won the match. So that's just out of testing. I'm currently playing this card. I don't know if you really need it if you played the deck completely correctly. Tinka apparently didn't feel the need to play it, but for me personally, I felt it was pretty important. For the side deck, Contact Sea is a pretty good card versus Prankets and Tri-Brigade right now, and the Phantom Knight deck is a deck that can definitely take advantage of stopping them for an entire turn. It can definitely accelerate from deck. You just put up Fogblade with Evil Swarm Nightmare and pop the entire board on the way with Rusty and your Break Sword. And usually your monsters are pretty big as well, so you can just run over their Tri-Brigade monsters. Cycle Reader, because Drychun can be a pretty annoying matchup for this deck. Phantasme versus any link-based deck, I would say. Also, Impermanence really a bad card versus Prankit, so Phantasme should make that matchup a bit better. Twin Twisters, because it's the best back row removal right now in the format, even though this deck doesn't play any spells, which I really like because it doesn't die to Anti-Spell or Order, which are frequently side deck cards right now. Still, Twin Twister in the standby phase versus Prankits, of course, is very good. And then I do play the Red Ice package in the side deck. Overall, I enjoy the decklist right now. I feel like it does enough versus the combo decks and the meta decks this format. It is a solid engine versus the rogue decks. Let's look at a little combo. So this is going to be our 1-card tour guide combo, and you can replace tour guide with Tone Scales, for example. They all worked pretty much the same. You need to get 2 level 3 monsters out, go into Cherubini here, use Graph's Effect to bring out the Scam from the deck. That Scam in the end phase is obviously going to get you another tour guide, which you can use as a follow-up. Don't forget the tour guide can actually summon tour guide from the deck as well, so that's going to be your follow-up. You're going to send Ancient Cloaks with the Cherubini to the grave. You're going to use Bardish to send the Torn Scales to the grave. That was a little mistake, should have been in the grave, was just a misclick, exactly. And then you're going to banish the Ancient Cloak to add the Silent Boots from your deck to your hand. That's going to trigger the Scales in the grave. You can special summon the Scales back. Summon the Silent Boots from the hand, go into Break Sword. Then Rusty is going to trigger because a Dark Exceed monster was special summoned into its zone. You're going to destroy the Break Sword, which has an effect that you can special summon 2 Phantom Knight monsters and their levels are going to be increased by 1. So you're going to go into Evil Swarm Nightmare. Okay, that was it talking about the Phantom Knight deck. Personally, I really enjoy this deck. It's a fun deck that you can play at any given tournament in the near future. I think it's a great meta call as well. It's reasonably cheap, so getting the cards for a remote duel or for your locals, I think it's going to be feasible. So what do you think about the Phantom Knight deck? What do you think about this list specifically that Dinka was playing? Do you think cutting the Dragoon is the right choice, or do you think you need the additional power maybe? What about other choices? Side deck as well, extra deck, main deck. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you loved it, subscribe, share it with a friend, and I will see you in the next one.